Everyone talks about freedom as if it were life's ultimate prize, an almost sacred ideal. They want to decide for themselves, follow their dreams, travel the world, make their own rules. But what few admit is that real freedom is neither free nor light. It requires an exchange, and that exchange is called responsibility. The truth is that freedom without responsibility is just an illusion. It's like wanting to drive a race car without learning the basic rules of driving. Many want the wheel, but few are willing to face the weight of every choice, the cost of every mistake, and the discipline required to stay in control. Freedom isn't doing whatever you want whenever you want. It's having the maturity to bear the consequences and still choose consciously. That's why freedom is scary, because it takes away the excuse of the other. With freedom, you can no longer blame your parents, your boss, the government, or fate. The blame and the credit is yours alone, and that's where many give up. Not because they don't want to be free, but because they're not ready to own themselves. In Friedrich Nietzsche's view, freedom is not an innate right, nor a gift granted by the world. On the contrary, it is a burden, a challenge, a silent and intimate battle against everything that makes us predictable, obedient, domesticated. Nietzsche saw society as a large herd, a collective of individuals who prefer security over truth, comfort over authenticity. Most people, according to him, live under the illusion of freedom, while in reality they are trapped by norms, religions, inherited customs, and values they never chose for themselves. The price paid for this false freedom is high, a life without authenticity, without risk, without greatness. True freedom, for Nietzsche, belongs only to those who have the courage to break these chains, who sever ties with inherited ideas and build their own values, alone. But this achievement comes at an extremely high cost, perhaps the highest of all: loneliness, conflict, and constant exposure to the chaos of existence. The man who seeks true freedom must first kill the idols. He must doubt sacred truths, laugh at popular moralism, and abandon the hope of a higher order guiding his steps. Nietzsche called this man the free spirit, and his journey is anything but easy. He walks without a map, without guarantees, without promises of redemption. His freedom is not debauchery, but an act of creation. He reinvents himself, sculpts himself, transforms himself continuously, even under the weight of absurdity and the anguish of having no guaranteed external purpose. This man carries within him the mission of becoming who he is, a task that demands discipline, willpower, and a courage that borders on heroism. Nietzschean freedom, therefore, is not an escape from responsibility. It is, in fact, the highest degree of human responsibility, to be the author of one's own existence, even when it means walking in the dark, against the wind, facing one's deepest fears. Nietzsche believed that most people prefer not to be free, even if they say otherwise, because true freedom offers no consolation. It brings no promises of happiness, nor does it give life automatic meaning. On the contrary, it destroys illusions, unmasks lies, and leaves the individual naked before nothingness. And it is in this nothingness that one must build everything. That's why Nietzsche saw freedom as a task reserved for the strongest, those who can live without existential crutches. These few become, in his words, Overman, not because they possess power or wealth, but because they do not bow before the fear of freedom. They dare to live without guarantees, dare to say yes to life, even in its cruelest, most chaotic, most tragic form. And it is precisely there, in that unstable terrain, that the true creative power of the human being is born. Not a power that dominates the external world, but a power that transforms the self, a power that, despite being lonely and painful, is the only path to a freedom that no one can take away. Étienne de la Boétie was a 16th century French thinker and jurist, best known for his work, The Discourse on Voluntary Servitude, written around 1549 when he was only 18. In a time marked by tensions between monarchical absolutism and the rise of humanist ideas, La Boétie presented one of the earliest and boldest critiques of authoritarian power. His central question is disturbing. Why do people obey tyrants, even when they are more numerous and theoretically stronger than them? To him, slavery is not only imposed by force, it is often consented to. What intrigued him most was not the power of the oppressor, but the passivity of the oppressed. According to Boétie, the tyrant remains in power only because people submit, get used to obedience, and even grow to like it. He did not see domination as something purely physical or military, but as a psychological and cultural habit. Over time, men stop desiring freedom because they no longer know what it would be like to live with it. They lose their taste for autonomy and develop a kind of sick affection for the chains that bind them, as if the comfort of not having to decide or think for themselves were worth more than the dignity of being free. Boétie observed that the tyrant relies not only on force but on a network of collaborators, small bosses, middle authorities, flatterers, ordinary people who become accomplices of the system because they gain crumbs of privilege. This power structure endures because many believe it's better to serve and benefit a little than to rebel and risk everything. It's a chain of voluntary submission. But for him, this chain could be broken with a simple gesture: to stop obeying. Boétie did not advocate violence or armed revolution. As he said, they resolved to serve, but if they simply refused, they would be free. Liberation begins when the individual realizes that the tyrant's power is based solely on their acceptance, on their surrender. If no one obeys anymore, power vanishes like smoke. Servitude, therefore, is not sustained by the oppressor's strength, but by the weakness of the oppressed spirit. This thought is even more striking because it exposes a deep wound in human nature: the fear of freedom. To be free requires responsibility, critical thinking, and courage to act on one's own. And often, that is more frightening than submission. Boétie noted that from childhood, men are taught to obey, to fear authority, to trust commands more than their own consciences. This education shapes people who feel uncomfortable with freedom, who prefer strong leaders, rigid rules, and the illusion of safety. Thus, the tyrant no longer needs to be cruel. He just needs to keep people entertained, fed, and afraid of losing the little they have. They become voluntary slaves, prisoners who no longer even realize they live in a cell. The great tragedy, according to Boétie, is that freedom was never out of reach. What's missing is the will to take it back. To be free is a fascinating, almost poetic idea, but in practice, it is one of the most difficult tasks a human being can take on, because to be free is like launching into the open sea in a small boat, without a compass, without a map, without a certain port to sail to. The vastness of the ocean represents life's infinite possibilities, but also the fear of the unknown, the risk of getting lost, the weight of having no guarantees. When someone chooses to be truly free, they are giving up the safe routes society offers. They are rejecting ready-made instructions, rigid norms, the paths others have already taken and swear are the right ones. And this doesn't just mean courage, it also means bearing the anguish of not knowing what lies ahead. To be free is to live without certainties. It's waking up every day and having to decide for yourself, even when everything around you screams for conformity. It's hearing the sound of the wind, not knowing whether it will lead you to paradise or shipwreck, and still continuing to sail. In slavery, whether physical, emotional, or ideological, everything is predictable. There are schedules, orders, rewards, and punishments. There's a system that guides every step, that tells you what's right and what's wrong. But in freedom, there's no external compass. The only direction is the one that comes from within, and often, that inner voice is conflicted, lost, fragile. That's why so many give up on freedom and prefer the comfort of obedience. It's easier to follow orders than to take the risk of creating your own destiny. It's easier to be a passenger than a commander. Sailing the sea of freedom is an act of faith in yourself, in a world where almost everything can go wrong. And even so, this journey is the only one that can lead someone to find true meaning, because only those who face the storm of uncertainty discover which values are truly theirs, which paths really matter, and what it means, in the end, to live fully, even without knowing exactly where they'll arrive.